I'm delighted to welcome today Dr. Barre Lando, Dr. Amandha Vollmer, and Steve Falconer. Thank you all for joining me. It's likely that people watching this will be completely unfamiliar with the term esoteric biochemistry. So I think a good place to start would be to actually explain what that term means and how that actually applies to us and our health going forward in this new health story. So if you'd like to start, Amandha, please, with this. How would you explain it to somebody?
Absolutely. And now that we're coming into the tail end of the end of COVID, we're discussing deeper concepts and other ways of thinking about health and the body, and also buried knowledge that we're resurging and bringing forward. And the esoteric biochemistry, which is really interesting, because if you go search that online, you find Steve. So he's made that term pop out. And then there's other chemists and things that will talk about this term. So there's a few definitions, but the way that I've defined it is that it is truly the internal sense of self that is and the spark of the God self, or the light within, is the driving force forward, the alchemy that happens between the material and the spiritual. So we are talking about electrical aspects, mental, emotional aspects that are more ethereal. They can't be pinned down per se, like you can't cut open a body and find it in there. And we obviously know that this exists, or else we would not be animated whatsoever. And we've seen death, and we know that we can sense that individual is no longer present. And so I view this as the mixture of the two inside, the internal barometer that is now driven from the chemistry, the biochemistry happening of that individual, and how they see their world, how they interact with their world, how they ingest their world and or not, and how they then project outward all of those admixtures inside of themselves. And it portrays to them what is important, their wants and needs and desires, and it can lead them to a path of health or a path of dis-ease, depending on what their soul's lessons are in those situations, which means that really it's a dance that we come into. So not to be so upset, if you will, if you're experiencing something that seems in imbalance, because it's really part of the lessons or part of the experiences that we're having in this life, and that there's all kinds of alchemy going on in the body, and we don't really even understand the physical body that well, but we are getting there, like other discussions we've had at the end of COVID about the power of water being structured very special to allow to work and operate like a battery. We need electrons, electricity to come into that system, and that those are the subtle energies that actually drive the system forward.
Yes, Steve.
Well, yeah, I could jump in. I agree. I think it's good. The reason I use the term esoteric biochemistry, esoteric just simply means, like an onion, there are deeper meanings and layers to everything. Exoteric means the basic thing we all get told, like Barre and Amandha are doctors. The chemistry they learned in college is not the chemistry we're going to be talking about today. I doubt either one of you heard anything about, for instance, Schussler tissue salts in medical school. I know a lot of homeopathic doctors who have still never heard of it. I'm getting letters from them saying, what is this? So for me, you could just call today's talk esoteric medicine even. We're going to talk about things that the public hasn't heard, that your doctors haven't heard, and another way, like Amandha just said, that the body runs itself, using the minerals that our bodies, all animals, mammalian and tissue are made out of. So to me, that's why I call it an esoteric biochemistry, because it's just not talked about. It's almost occulted. As Amandha said, you should find more on this. And aside from Schussler, who I would say was an exoteric biochemist, there's only people like Dr. George Washington Carey, Inez Perry, Charles Littlefield. There were very few who were actually talking about what people like Dr. Barre Lando talk about, which is how the cosmos is interacting electrically, electromagnetically, and interacting physically with our bodies. And you could also call this astrology, which has been given a bunk name. Nowadays, everyone thinks, oh, that's Mystic Meg, you will meet a, and that is bunk, like that's bunk. But astrology is actually a very old, ancient, occulted science of the ecliptic or the wave or toroidal field mechanics of a toroidal field. It's not bunk. And I could actually say we did this in the history of virology. 2,400 years ago, there was a guy called Democritus. And this is where we get this materialism idea from. Back then, they believed that if you became ill, the gods were punishing you. You had done something wrong and the gods were punishing you. And that's what the plague, or that's why you have red bumps on yourself, or disease. And Democritus thought, well, this is very superstitious. We can't have this. This is really more religious control. So he came up with the idea of atomism, that everything's material, physical, things are made out of little atoms, which just means like the smallest you can cut something with the sharpest knife at the time. And that makes molecules and that makes tissue. And that was that. That's all there is to it. And if one of those little things gets sick, then it spreads out to all the rest and you get sick. The problem with that is that eliminates all of the mental kind of things that probably have been discussed in this conference: placebo, nocebo, stress, fear, German new medicine, right? All of the other things that have nothing to do with the physical body, but that interact with the physical body, got wiped out because of this guy. Now, the ironic thing is, when you understand that the gods of those days were metaphors for the sun, the moon, and the wandering planets, we call the wandering stars, we call planets, they do affect you. So it's not that you're being punished by the gods, but it's that some of these illnesses are because of some of the resonances going on at certain times of the year and even the day that are interacting with your body, with some of these 12 mineral cell salts, which we're going to discuss in this thing. So in a weird way, yes, they were right, but they just misunderstood a very much older science. They had a misunderstanding of it. What about you, Barre? What do you think is esoteric biochemistry, or what's different about regular chemistry?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that the chemistry that I learned in medical school would be considered very esoteric by the scientists, the true scientists of old, who had much more of an in-depth understanding of how our bodies and our realm works, and also how to have more predictable results in their farming, in their making of medicines, and their treating the body. So esoteric is simply a perspective. And, my journey in functional bioterrain medicine has taught me that, what I was taught in the conventional side doesn't work that well. That forced me to look elsewhere, including into these ancient texts and things. And so I've proved these things out myself. And, we have to understand, in functional medicine, you're not looking at theories or batting around philosophies. What you're really doing is in real time, applying certain methodologies and observing the results. And that is, I think, the true definition of empiricism or science. The next thing we have to jump to is that it's already been mentioned, is that we live in an electrical realm, and our bodies are a smaller step-down version of the larger electrical system. Now, in the old science, they talked about things in metaphors. For instance, they talked about the atmosphere as ether. They also talked about different levels of that ether in terms of, fire, air, water, and earth. But in a contemporaneous understanding, we're really talking about hydrogen, as that fire element. We're talking about nitrogen as the most pure mineral substance, in that it has a coagulative effect on that first level of precipitation, we'll say. And then that steps down into the realm of oxygen, and the interaction of nitrogen and oxygen is the first step where things start becoming fixed into what we think of as matter. And then the carbon element that we would equate with Earth, you can think of as the South Pole. You know, it's a dipole. And if you go all the way to the top where we started, that's the North Pole. So you're really looking at an electrical system where you have conduction, you have capacitance, and you have resistance, which is the speed of electricity. So I think if we start thinking in terms of, the elements as we're taught in school and how an electrician would work, it really makes it not esoteric at all, and very common sense. And the last thing I'll say just to start is with the cell salts, since we're going to be getting into those. It's an understanding that the body uses certain substances in order to repair itself and to regenerate, and also to remove things from itself that are not necessary, and maybe a buildup would be detrimental. So wouldn't it make sense that if you're out on a work crew somewhere and you have all the workers ready to go, they know what to do, but they don't have the materials delivered to them, they're not going to be able to do their job. The cell salts are, in fact, the substance that the body is made out of. And so it makes perfect sense to me that if you want to get the body working, you have to provide what it's made of in the first place. And the cell salts can also be understood in electrical terms as capacitors. That is, an electrician understands capacitance is the ability to receive and store energy. And if we get a little bit more into the weeds later, I'll let you guys do that. Then we're talking about these electrical vectors having to, be received in that space that then conveys that to the cells of the body so that they can do their job.
Absolutely. If I can share my screen, I'd like to just read a quote that goes exactly with what you said. By the way, these cell salts, they were known by the ancients. They were rediscovered, I would argue, by Dr. Schussler. But there was a man, a very strange unknown man at the time, named, can you see that on the screen, Dr. Charles Littlefield? Can you see that?
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah. So he was an analytical chemist. He wrote a book in 1935 that never got published until 1995. It was just a little small book called Man, Minerals, and Masters. And he said the 12 mineral salts are, in a very real sense, the material basis of the organs and tissues of the body. Now, I don't like to call them cell salts. I like to call them tissue salts, because cellular biology, again, is another thing being heavily questioned these days. I'm not so sure it works that way. But these people come from a time when there was cellular biology theory. So, but anyway, he says, they're the basis. They are the material basis of the organs and tissues in the body, and are absolutely essential to the integrity and structural functional activity of those. And his experiments proved that the various tissue parts will rapidly disintegrate in the absence of the proper proportion of these 12 salts in the circulating fluids of the body and tissue. Whereas the maintenance of this proportion ensures healthy growth and perpetual renewal of tissue. So we're not talking about just healing, we're talking about regeneration. He said these mineral salts are therefore the physical basis of all healing, regardless of the school employed. If these are absent from the blood and tissues, which is what Barre just said, no permanent cure is possible. In other words, he's saying, you can take your German new medicine and you can take all your naturopathic stuff, but he's saying, like, Barre, if you don't have the tools, it's not going to be a permanent fix. And the last quote I had was a man called Dr. Linus Pauling, who he claimed you can trace every sickness, every disease, every ailment to a mineral deficiency, period. Would you agree with that?
Yep.
I would.
I was going to say there are 12 tissue salts, and they each have a function in different parts of the body. If you'd like to kind of expand on that, and which parts or how that works, or and the relevance of the number 12 and why there were 12 of them.
Yeah, which is a really good question, because in other astrological Vedic systems, it's as 13. And there are more tissue salts than just the 12 basics. There's 16 extra ones as well, or sorry, 15 extra ones. So there's 27 fully. And they all have different affinities. So potassium arsenite, for example, is for skin and vitality. Or manganese sulfate, it helps with the iron system. So we're talking about these trace nutrients now that are fundamental, that are found in every single cell of the body. And without them, there's or whatever we're calling cell, because we're looking at cells once we extract them from the body. And once we've extracted them from the body, they formulate different membrane systems, but inside the body might not be the same situation as Steve was alluding. But one thing I wanted to bring up when Barre was talking, and after Steve was mentioning about the fire, earth, air, water sort of aspect, is that there's a life force. And so I'm trained in Chinese medicine, and we look at different aspects of the body based on these elements, but also their forces. So for example, there's cardinal, fixed, and mutable signs. And so cardinal is Aries, Capricorn, Cancer, Libra. And that is part of the renewal system. It's the initiator, and it's the magnetic force. And what it does is it creates and rebuilds. And it's like the initiator. So if you're starting to feel run down, right, which means that your body's being triggered into a cleansing mode, but it needs an initiator. And so that's the energy of initiation. And then there's the fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, I'm Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. And that's your vital force, the energetic system. That's a heavy motor. That's getting the job done. It's the worker bees, right? And then you have the mutable signs. And that's the electric force. That's the cleansing system and the purification aspect. So that's Virgo, Pisces, Gemini, Sagittarius, right? So they're all broken up into these sections. And it's fascinating because it has a lot to do with conception, where your deficiencies are. And you can, this can be tested scientifically. We can do this when we're allowed to do this kind of science, when it's not all locked down. This is the kind of stuff, this is exciting stuff that we'll be able to do. And takes, a baby that's just born, we know immediately there are at least 3 salts, maybe 4, depending on when they were born, that they're going to be deficient in right out of the gate. There's no pediatrician talk about this. There's nobody saying, hey, this baby's born in a deficiency state already, because the cell salts that are being used to manufacture all the tissues, when the baby is born now, the rest have to come from the mother. So the mother should be supplementing with these critical tissue salts, and it's all based on where they are in conception and their birth date. And still going forward, those who are deficient from, say, born, like one of mine is Mag Phos. I was born in August. And so I'm always supplementing those 3 that I would have needed from birth throughout my life, as I'm pulsing those, because I use those more. Those are my weaker areas. And I was actually going to write a PhD paper. Somebody else actually beat me to it when I was in naturopathic college, on the astrological signs and the related organ systems of weakness. And as a patient would come to me, I'd always want to know their astrology. Like, I've been studying astrology since I was 12 years old. But when people would come, what's your astrology? Or I'd guess, and I'd usually guess pretty right. But what would I be on top of is their weaker organ system. I would already know what they were coming into. I could even sometimes predict or guess what they were about to tell me based on this. And we're really missing some key knowledge as far as practitioners go when you're assessing someone. And I thought it was very poignant and important information to relate these things to organ systems and their functionality and the way that they cleanse. So if you're stuck, say there's a case where it's not moving forward and it's stuck, well, that's a good key indicator. You might be missing that tissue salt, which can sort of open the floodgates again and move the case forward. And so any practitioner watching this, really get your cell salts in your head and learn when you see a patient to apply this knowledge, and you'll get interesting results. And as we study it more, we'll be able to, really concretize the knowledge, so it's not so esoteric in the frou-frou way for people, right? In the woo way.
I've got some graphics real quick to show. I can show people what Amanda was just saying. And then maybe Barre would like to talk about why this is happening. I've always said, let me share that one. Hold on a second. So here's a person born cusp to cusp. Again, the 12 main salts, Dawn, are because this is based on tropical astrology. It was a northern science with the 12 signs. So here you can see someone who's born cusp to cusp. So their inception's on the left here, March. Oh, maybe I can make this bigger, actually. I think I can. So let's say they're born right on the cusp, like me. I'm a Virgo Leo cusp. I'm born August 23rd. So I'd be a cusper. So that's when you were conceived, when you were a sparkle in daddy's eye and a desire in his heart. And mommy was up to good, and more good. So these 9 months, you'd be in gestation. And that's when your mother would be giving you each of these minerals to start building your body structure with. Well, obviously something's wrong, because most animals, when they're born, they pop out walking already. They can go right up to their mother's teeth, almost most of them. For some reason, our women's hips are not wide enough, and we have to come out what I would call I'd say we're all preemies, in my own opinion. But anyway, so you can see there were these 3 months where your mama didn't put anything in you because you weren't around yet. So that's the deficiencies there. If you're a cusp to cusp, you would be missing these 3 salts, calcium, phos, natrium, myrrh, ferrum, phosphate. Now you could also, like Amanda was saying, you could be born mid-cusp, because the energies change every month. So here's one. Am I sharing this still? No, here we go. No, I am. Come on, Zoom, sort it out. There we go. Here's a person. You can see they're conceived midway through a sign. See this? So they're born midway through a sign. And therefore, not only did they miss 3, but they missed part of a 4th one. So they're not complete. And then you could have a person like my son, who was born 2 months preemie, and had a real rough time of it. Well, if you have that, now you got a real problem, because not only were you not around for 3 of those signs, but you missed the 2 months that you were supposed to still be in your mother cooking, getting those minerals. And if you were a half cusp, you've already missed another one. So now you're up to 6. So a person born mid cusp who's 2 months premature, you can bet your ass, if you're not giving them cell salts, that person is going to have a lot of different physical ailments throughout their life from various body parts. And what these charts show you, and Barre can talk about why. I'll just show you the last zodiac wheel. There is a chart that has been put together by amazing geniuses like Dr. George Washington Carey, Dr. Inez Perry, and Santos Bonacci is teaching this. So and Barre as well. When you find out what sign you are, for instance, like a Virgo here, every one of these signs, and therefore every salt assigned to them, are part of a certain part of your body. So you can see on the left here, I'm in Aries. That's your cerebrum, your spinal cord, sensory nerve, your face to lower jaw, not your cerebellum. That's Taurus, your motor action. And then that salt is potassium phosphate. And so on it goes. So, if you were born there, you'd also be having trouble with your Taurus, and you'd be having trouble with your Gemini and all of the organs that correspond with those. And again, if you were born premature, it would go on and on. That person would probably be a medical wreck. And my son was, when he was younger, I had to put him on cell salts daily, and now he's healthy as pie. But maybe, I don't know, Barre, do you want to explain why that happens?
Yeah, I think maybe if we reduce it down to basic histology, I like to be practical about these things, and not everybody's an astrologist or an astrologer. I think if we learned in medical school histology about these elements, it would not be very much more elegant, but also much more functional and easier to understand. So if we want to just simplify it for right now, we could take groups of these inorganic elements, which I like to term them rather than cell salts. And if we're going with the idea of, again, these are electrical capacitors, the natrium compounds, the salt compounds, are really much involved with the distribution of fluids in the body and how the fluids, make up the different tissues of the body. The calcium compounds, on the other hand, really play a big role in forming allowing the cells to take those compounds and form all the structural elements, connective tissues, and so forth. Phosphorus elements would be more relative to, primarily, with the nerves. Ferrum, iron is, really the conveyor of oxygen. So, and of course, there's a great overlap where, all the tissues use a little bit of all of them, but those are kind of the primary categorizations. So if you look how different tissues of the body are combinations of all those substances that we recognize, as making up our biological matrix, now it just becomes a lot more common sense as far as how these play out. Now, I really love to get into the astrology and follow the whole Zodiac kind of retrograde ending in Pisces, and it, explains how we embryologically unfold and everything that these guys are talking about. What I love about what you said, Amanda, was, bringing up the Chinese medicine context, because when you study Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic, the old alchemist texts, and if you can get through the cultural jargon, you really understand that they're talking about the same exact thing. And in this day and age, we have, with the advent of a deeper understanding of waveform mechanics and even molecular biology, which I don't really prescribe to molecules, but you can even kind of make that work if you want to, go into that realm. Now, the old alchemy realm, what they talked about is we go back to those 4 levels of ether, and these 4 levels of ether would create, we have what we call volatile elements and fixed elements, as we step down, as we already explained, and they create the 3 elements of who we are. On the soul level, on a biological level, and also how that is an interaction of that more anonymous, amorphous substance that we think of in other cultural terms, where we call chi and prana. And, this is just a substance of the universe. And you can, debate on where that comes from in the first place. I have my own belief systems, but it really doesn't matter, because that highest level of the volatile element, if you take it and combine it with the next volatile level, which is that nitrogen or the air element, now that is, what creates what we call in alchemy the mercury, or the prana or the chi. And then you take the water element, next one down, the first fixed element, and combine it with the air element up above. And then we have the sulfur. We're not talking about sulfur in terms of modern understanding of that particular element, but sulfur is the individualization, us, who we are to soul level, what we embodied, as far as a collective of our experience and what we came here to do in the first place. And, then you have the salt element. By the way, the sulfur or the individualization, you can also apply to the plant and mineral kingdom, because that is what we would call more the oversoul. If you take a species of plants, for instance, that oversoul would give the characteristics of a particular herb, for instance, where that plant, shares all those same characteristics, different than, all of us in the human kingdom, where we're all very distinct in many ways, even though we do have some commonality. So then the final, of that triad, we'll call it, is the salt element, or the body. And the body is what allows the mercury and the salt, to coagulate into what we think of as matter. So now when you start thinking and putting all those terms together, it really makes alchemy very practical, very grounded. And it also, goes back to the role of the cell salts as far as how they in the salt element allow that resonance or that precipitation to happen in our biological matrix in the first place. And the last thing I'll say is that if we are deficient in any of these inorganic elements, not only will we have physical symptoms, which should not be confused with disease in any way, but are in fact the body's cries for help, as Dr. Carey used to explain. And, of course, if the body talked to us in pleasant ways, it probably wouldn't get our attention or allow us to, fix things in the first place. So, it's just, I think a real practical matter. And if we think about it in terms, I'd like to go more into the mechanics, maybe a little bit further down into our talk, as far as, what's really creating the geometrical forms and functions of everything from the cells to the so-called atoms and everything else that we, have to tend to when we're, playing farmer or doctor.
Yeah, I was going to say the importance of this is the practicality of it. It's not some kind of esoteric in the sense that it's just a sort of philosophical idea, that it's absolutely practical and useful and functional and important. And also these tissue salts are not to be regarded in the same way as people think of as supplements, that they're not. They are vital elements of our food intake. It's not an extra. They should be regarded, from my understanding, they should be regarded as part of our everyday intake.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Barre, because you actually make these, don't you? You manufacture your own cell salts, is that correct?
I do, but it's in such limited quality, I can't make it available to the public. It takes a long, long time. And you have to start with the mineral elements and then put it through an alchemical process, which is separating those same, 3 components, the sulfur, the mercury, and the salt, and then purifying, and then, putting them back together. It gets pretty involved. It's very time consuming, but for my own experimentation, yes.
Right, because when you say inorganic, you mean non-carbon based, right? You're saying that these salts are non-carbon elements. That's what you mean. And they do fuse,
Yes.
correct, in the body and start to make organic when they fuse with spirit. Now, this is the other thing that, we got back to Democritus and later Rudolf Virchow. Again, they take the spirit and the prana and the chi and the etheric body. We're all talking no-nos right now in modern science. You'll be defrocked for that. You're not allowed to talk about that. That doesn't exist. And my understanding is, unlike most homeopathic supplements, like you're saying, Dawn, cell salts are only done to the 6th potency, not to the 12th. So they still have some of the original matter left. They're not just reduced to complete chemical. Is that correct, Barre or Amanda?
Yeah, it's not triturated the same way as a homeopathic would, with the potentization in the same manner. And you actually aren't going past Avogadro's so-called number, where you're having actual physical matter in the tissue salt that you're supplementing. So it's not gone off the 30C CH potency, which is just like more of a water memory imprint aspect. So it's prepared a little bit differently.
I just wanted to read a couple of things and maybe get you guys' take. These are some opinions from some other people in dealing with these. And I like it because they kind of get into what we want to get into, which is how is this interacting with what we'd call the non-physical or the spiritual? This one was someone called Tanya Lee Collop, and she says every cell, or let's say tissue and organ even, or every being and everything, has a spiral vortex. Every organ has one too. If the spiral vortex is repaired and rebalanced, then the cell or organ can heal and self-correct. Just like the aura supports health and the spiral vortices do too, the etheric body is the first layer of the aura, in other words, closest to the physical body, and acts as a template for the physical body. In order for the physical body to heal, the etheric must first heal. Cell salts work at the etheric level. They have a subtle but very high vibration. Would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, and you just reminded me of some experience that someone had that just told me, where their cats, I believe, had really bad fleas. Okay, and there's a behavior associated with the fleas, the scratching and the rubbing and certain soothing. Well, treated the fleas are gone for quite a time. No eggs, no sign of a flea. And it was used as a chemical to get rid of the fleas, so not a natural approach. And the person noticed that the animals were still acting as if the fleas were still with them. And this is, like I said, this is a perfect example of the energetic signature not being cleared from the body, because it is calling to the flea. You know, there's an energy in the body, and then there's a residue signature of the process that has to now decant, or has to now be spiraled away from the body. And if the animal could do breathing exercises or biofield tuning or humming or chanting or some sort of activity, or qigong or something, to move that flow of that energy, then it would be fully released and then integrated into the experience. But because it was just poisoned, the bodies were poisoned, but the energy signature remained. So the root cause of why those animals had the fleas in the first place is still present. And I just thought that was a really interesting example of kind of, you know, what you were talking about there, that there's more to release than the physical or the material, or what we think is material.
Do you think that's like the ghost pains, you know, when people lose their finger or something, they still feel it for a while? Do you think
Their
that's what's
fields,
going on
their
instead of the
energy.
nerves, but that, yeah?
Well,
That's
yeah,
fascinating.
that if you have, we know we have aura. We can measure aura. You know, some people can see it. Barbara Brennan, she had Hands of Light, that book, where she was fully clairvoyant, and she could see arrows shooting from people's thoughts and different sorts of interactions with people who were angry or sad. And she could see transfers of energy between people, or people just dumping, you know, onto another, this sort of thing. And so if we lose a physical limb, the energy signature is still there. And a book by Dr. Richard Gerber called Vibrational Medicine, they were able to regrow limbs in frogs and mice and tails and things, using that knowledge that the holographic energy is still there. And just because the physical aspect is gone, and if you stimulate stem cells properly and the inputs are there, then it will actually regrow. And I've even had one guy regrow his thumb. He cut his thumb off and down to the first knuckle, and he started applying DMSO and some other things, and he grew his entire thumb back. I'd never thought that was even possible. So we're just starting to remember this again and learn how to apply it properly.
And it also connects very much with the electrical side of things. As you were saying, with biofield tuning, there's been a session on that. And also Dr. Robert O'Becker, with his experiments, he was able to regrow salamander tails, all sorts of things that they'd cut off. So yes, sorry, Bev, please continue.
No,
Go ahead.
I was
My
just
hair.
going to riff off of, I was just going to continue a little bit. The only difference between a lizard that can regrow a tail and ourselves is that a lizard does not have the ability to outsmart itself. So the human has a great capacity to over-intellectualize and then also have emotions that give those belief systems the velocity to create these overlays that then, you know, those original patterns from our creator within nature have to filter through those. In homeopathy, we call them maybe miasms. And you know, disease, the way I think of it, is really ignorance. And I don't mean just ignorance on an intellectual level, but the inability to receive those primal, you know, larger patterns within nature that would keep everything perfect. So relating that back to the cell salts are the way that we rebuild our body into a complete receiving, you know, matrix that can receive those original patterns that will then really overcome those overlays, those miasmic influences, those false belief systems, the toxic emotions. And, again, we're not talking intellectual, but when our body is put back into order, then we have insights and understandings that makes the esoteric seem, again, very logical and very practical, even though, when we're adulterated with, synthetic foods and medicines and being chemtrailed and everything else and having things injected into our bodies, it really, precludes our ability to receive that, those original patterns in the first place. And that is disease. It's not an entity that exists in nature in any way. It is just the absence of knowledge and the absence of the elements that our biology needs in order to receive that knowledge.
That's well said. And if I can add that also we have the understanding with, excuse me, with the disease state that, that is just deficiency or just, some sort of overlay aspect, that there's all of these layers happening at once. So you're peeling back the knowledge of what that individual is, so that it's really comes down to individual medicine. I mean, I make protocols, we do these things in general. There's all kinds of general things we need, general salts and nutrients and life that or interactions, social interactions, these things that make us healthy or make us feel good. But ultimately, it's an individual process that when you're looking at it from a practitioner side, you're trying to figure out, okay, where is the real root of this? Where did it stem from? Is it a miasm that's come from a lineage? And or is it from an accident? And what is an accident? I don't think there are really accidents. I think it's an agreement, it's a contract to go through an experience or a mistake of the energies where they're in sin, because the definition of sin is that deficiency, right? And the original sin, I think, is the original sin of not having those tissue salts at birth. So you're a sinner, going throughout your life, and that's coming down to ignorance. And you can take that in every avenue of law, like we are in hell when we're in debt. That's the definition of hell, is debt. So it's by our own hand, our own ignorance, that we've come to this place. And so not having to fall into victimhood when these things happen is really important. As Barre was alluding to, the way your mind is, the way you think of the situation you're in is going to lead to how your outcome is in your resolve, and could lead to further trauma or, spiraling down into accidents or other problems where you're something in the inside of you is trying to project out of you a feedback system to tell you where to go on course, and that you're off course. It will show you, it will throw you. And that to me is where we're trying to make those corrections. And then we have all these other aspects that are distracting us from getting to the heart of it, to the real center of it. And so it really comes down to looking within.
I think also one of the things, how the cell salts even relate to this, when you start to have sin, you're right, that means deficiency. Sin means without, deficient. When you're deficient in certain ones of these salts, it starts to affect the purity of the certain oils in your cerebrospinal fluid and even your brain tissue. And you start to get physically brain damage and nervous system conditions that make you too brain dead and too skittish to emotionally deal with stuff you could probably handle if you were at least efficient, just like we see it when the kids go to daycare and they have like German New Medicine talks about the separation trauma, and they start getting ill because now you've ripped them away from their mother when they should be hanging out with her for at least 8 years and not being thrown in daycare. But not all the kids get that. Not every kid has a freak attack and gets, expresses a dis-ease. So that's one of the important things about at least keeping your body in tune, is it can help lessen some of the mental effect. Dr. Carey and Inez Perry, they argued the reason the world is in the state it's in is because we are in sin, we are in deficiency, and poisoning ourselves with alcohol and bad food and drugs and stress and that it's both physical and mental. I kind of got into this. I don't know if you guys ever got into like Martin Brofman, Anything Can Be Healed. Bruce Lipton, The Biology of Belief, Rupert Sheldrake, Morphogenetic Fields. To me, all that in German New Medicine is talking about what we're talking about. You can heal the body and it will heal the mind, or you can heal the mind and it can heal the body. Like, they're connected. And I think it's like Amanda said, it's personalized healing. There's no one way. I see in the medical community, which, I'm not a practicer or anything, but I'm paying attention. Everyone's fighting like it's my way. No, it's acupuncture. No, it's energy is healing. No, it's structured water. No, it's cell salts. And I actually think, as I put in that film I made, they're all talking about the same damn thing. They're just talking about it from a different perspective. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I can add to that. Oh, go ahead, Barre.
Go ahead, Amanda. No, please go.
Well, I was just going to add to it another book, which is Archetypal Medicine. This is Alfred Ziegler. And, one of the things that's said in this sort of philosophical treatise is that hospitals are actually should be treated kind of like jails, that they're incarcerated. People who are in the hospital are incarcerated and they're immobilized on purpose because they're in there because they had intention of harm in some way. Excuse me. So they had some intention. So say they came with a broken arm. Well, what he was making an illusion that say that person they were about to steal something, or they were about to take something from someone without asking, or or worse, that broken arm was preventing them from doing something that would be a further sin or deficiency to themselves. And that was actually a protection. And in even the incarceration idea is like this protection idea that they don't know how to save themselves or help themselves, right? They're like lost lambs. And so I guess they need, what's the one, Caliphos? Is that, we need potassium? Lamb's wool from that book you showed, Steve. Lamb's wool has the highest amount of Caliphos, I think.
Yeah, and the Zodiac and the salts, it's a Spanish lamb. It's a certain mutton, a Spanish one. Yeah, it's totally loaded with the Aries Caliphos. Yeah, exactly.
I was just going to, as we were showing books, that's the one that people were referring to.
I've got the blue version.
Oh,
but it's, I can't remember the name, but yeah, it's a special Spanish lamb that's just loaded in it. Yeah. And that's why they eat it at also the Passover. That's why they were eating it.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Barre.
Well, I was just going to mention that the inorganic elements can also be used symptomatically or prophylactically. So as we already mentioned, if we're looking at our constitutional salt and our bridge salts, those are the foundation that we should all get clued in on and include those in our diet. And if we live in a day and age, it's just take a hypothetical that some people are getting things injected into their bodies that have ingredients that create coagulations, that can create accretions, that can interfere with microcirculation, even create, embolisms and cardiac infarcts and things like that. Well, just take one example. You could take Callium muriaticum, which is responsible for interacting with the organic elements that then translate that into fibrin. And, fibrin is used in many tissues and functions in the body. But if, let's just say somebody who had something, noxious injected into them to create coagulations, then and if they're on top of it, short of Callium muriaticum, then they're going to have an even greater tendency to, have those potentially lethal problems. So, a lot of people are wondering what to do to counteract some of the effects of these injections these days. Well, the first rule of bioterrain medicine is to put your terrain in order so that no matter what, you can weather it better than most people. And, we're not just talking about the cells of the body, that, take those inorganic and organic elements and conjugate them into what it needs to build the tissues and regenerate and remove what doesn't belong there. But there are other microorganisms that are indigenous to our body. And, one of those, for instance, mucorracemiosis is really our little helper in there that helps us achieve proper microcirculation. And together with Callium muriaticum, if you were to take what we call an isopathic, which is a protein seed form of that organism that lives in us, then that is going to be there, as far as a little worker, along with the cells of the body, along with the, say, Callium muriaticum, to prevent that coagulation or mitigate the effects of what we might get in the injection in the first place. So I think in this day and age, the inorganic elements and knowledge of how they work, along with their interaction with the cells and also those indigenous organisms within us that pleomorphically change into different life cycle phases to provide valuable functions to us, just that knowledge alone is actually much easier to understand and learn in the first place than all the gobbledygook that Amanda and I had to endure during school. And also our patients would be a lot better off for it.
You're talking about chloride of potassium, correct? For people who are saying, what the hell is calimiratasium?
Yeah, one more quick add-on that's just kind of fun. If you look at Callium, what's that?
Gemini.
Coincides with Gemini.
Gemini, yeah.
And of course the metaphor of Gemini is like the spider web and all sorts of things. But then what does that fibrin do? It creates all those spider webby networks of, nerves and vascularity and fibrin and, that I look at under the microscope in people's blood. So, it's kind of neat that when you go back and really understand what these folks were talking about, it's like, wow, that's what I'm looking at, in people's blood here. So they really did kind of have an understanding, more so than doctors these days.
That's what's great. Yeah, Gemini. So that's your lungs, pleural glands, bronchial tubes, all your fibers and tissues. It's also your shoulders, your hands, and your lungs, the twins. Gemini, Castor and Pollux, the two twins. That's why I like the Zodiac version of this science. I love that you're breaking it down to, hey, what the hell's this? Let's just talk regular biology. But for me, it's more fun to learn it because it shows that these ancients very much knew what they were doing when they picked these glyphs in this Zodiac. For example, you look at Leo, like if you ever look at the constellation Leo, it's a stick figure lion that a 3-year-old child could draw better. The reason they picked it is you start to find out that people who are born in Leo, they have eyes closer together, almost cat-like. I know for a fact Amanda is a Leo. Her birthday is, don't tell me it's July 5th, was it? And yeah, I was going to say, Bear, I can see in your face, you're either Aries, Bear, or you're somewhere right between me and Amanda. I'm the cusp, August 23rd. I would bet you're either Aries, Bear, or you are like right between Amanda and I. You're a Leo.
Actually, I'm a Leo. Yeah.
When's your birthday, if I can ask, or if you don't want to say, you don't have to.
Well, it's on the cusp, and most of my life I thought I was a Virgo, but then I had a client who was a kind of a famous astrologer. She insisted on doing my chart. She says, no, everything's in Leo.
Right.
So,
and you'll see people
so
who
I
are
found out late in life.
Yeah, people who are born with the sun in the Pisces sign, they usually have wider eyes like fish. Like their eyes are not close together. They're out. So the people who did these glyphs, they were well aware, which is going to get into what you wanted to talk to about, Bear, was the geometry of how this works. I guess Rupert Sheldrake called it morphogenetics, but it's not genetics really. But I explained it in my film as like, they're like chicken wire, you know what I mean? They make the frame and then the cell salts bring together the energy and the water and the everything together, the inorganic and organic, and sort of put the paper mache that make a heart instead of a liver, or, you know, which is a funny one too, because if you look at Libra, for instance, that's the scales of justice. That's your kidneys, the two scales, like, everywhere in your body, these associate. They're totally just like the signs that they picked and like the organs that they represent, which is fascinating. Can I just read one more thing, and then we can get into more like what you were talking about, how does this work and what's going on? I'll share this. It's by a girl called Lisa Renee. Do you know her?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And also the kidneys, by the way, one is a little bit higher than the other. So I find that interesting too.
Oh, yeah. And actually the scales, they're not in balance, are they? When you see the Libra glyph, I don't think they're evenly balanced. It's also has to do with it's in the greater, we won't get into that, but that's when the sun in the year starts to not go above the ecliptic anymore. It's lower in the sky in the northern hemisphere, and it's being judged because it's going to go down at night, into hell or over the winter. So this is by Lisa Renee, and it says, this ancient knowledge was studied and understood by many of the ancient mystery schools, such as Alexandria, Egypt, and Greece, and the importance of mineral cell salts in the process of spiritual initiation into what they called hierogamic union. And that comes from the words hieros and gamos, which means the integration of spirit and the physical. So again, this is what that Democritus guy took out. There's no spirit, there's no nothing. Everything's just atoms, molecules, and materialism. And that just isn't true. The new medicine from here on out is bringing back spirit, etheric, what we would call the non-physical. But anyway, and then she says, which allows higher frequencies to be embodied through the nourishing of the cells, or tissues, we'll call it, with the mineralized energy form that is required to transmute the cell. Tissue salts consist of the natural elements occurring in the body itself, identical substances. They form the basic constituents of the cells, tissues, and organs, and the body uses their energies for metabolic functions, as Barre was saying. When the tissue salts are required for these functions, there should be an adequate supply available in the body and its fluids to draw upon. If there is insufficiency, the cells convert their material structure to provide that energy. And then the cell goes into a depleted state, or we'll call it tissue. So she's saying that if you don't take these tissues that give you the energy, your body tissues are going to give the energy themselves, and you're going to start having dying tissue, or organ failure, we could call that. Should this cycle continue, namely of material substance converting to provide energy without nutritional replacement, the cells or tissue lose their ability to function correctly. Would you agree with that statement? Anyone?
Yeah.
Or would like to add anything to it?
Seems legit.
Yep.
Interesting that it's so essential to life that it has to degrade itself to get them, to continue. So it is like the input for the life force to keep that integration between the life force energy coming in, which has been shown to come in through the solar plexus in the back, through into the body that way, and then transmute it into actual material substance or processes. And if the cells can't handle it, or if the tissue salts are not there, then every single cell has these tissue salts, as was identified by Schussler and then previous people, that it will self-degrade, it will eat itself. That's just like a snake eating its tail.
Yeah, the Ouroboros, which is always drawn around the Zodiac wheel as well. Barre, I saw you do an interesting talk one time. Let's say forget about these supplements, because we're in the modern age. We're lucky we can get them biochemically prepared. Where would you get these in foods? And I swear I thought I heard you say you could get this right out of the air. Where do these come from, and besides our mother? How does that work?
Well, if you default to, again, alchemy, and the explanation we already gave, how the different levels of ether coagulate the volatile and fixed elements, for that final precipitation into the ground we walk on and the bodies that we inhabit. That's all happening in the atmosphere. Now, if you understand what's going on up there, it doesn't stretch your imagination. So doesn't it make sense that our biology, which is the most advanced technology ever and nothing will ever supersede it, has the ability as a microcosm of that same etheric mechanics, the ability to absorb and take things right out of the atmosphere. And in the science of ionization analysis, which is a system of chemical assay that then extrapolates molecular findings in the fluids of the body or in the soil, I use them for both. It provides you a mathematical proportion of key elements that create an electrical line of resistance. Now, when that electrical line of resistance in its proper zone, it would be impossible for the body to age. The soil outside is going to be perfectly compatible with a micronage of the rootlets, and you have perfect uptake without hardly any need to fertilize. And our bodies that were designed to be 0-point superconductors, that's what our neurology really is, then it would be able to more efficiently receive things that we need for sustenance right out of the atmosphere. And in that science, we understand that 70%, even in the worst of us, that don't have great lifestyle habits or understanding, 70% of our nutrition is actually derived directly from the atmosphere. Just like, a tree outside, when the weather gets cold and there's more nitrogen in the atmosphere, creates higher coagulation of the sap, affects the circulation of the tree, and the tree loses its leaves. All of nature, works like this. There's nothing mysterious about it. So, again, just understanding the basic principles. And again, I think the alchemists really had a brilliant way of simplifying things so that it could then be used, applied to, every endeavor you can think of. So, yeah, I don't know if
That's like these,
yeah.
so these breatharians, then they're for real, aren't they? If you are vibrating at a high enough level, you could be a breatharian.
Yeah. Right now I just ended a fast. I do periodic ones, and, not to try to be Spartan or trendy or anything else, but I've just understood over the years, even when I was, very large and playing sports back in my younger years, I always did weekly 36-hour fasts, because I recognized early on that it wasn't just about stuffing myself with calories to get big. It was that when I ceased eating food, that was equally as nutritious, because it would give my body, just a little bit of a break or a breath, so that it could more efficiently absorb in other ways, and then use the foodstuffs when you are eating in a more efficient way to provide energy in a very crude way that then jumpstarts the mechanism where we really derive the majority of our nutrition directly atmospheric in the first place.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's great. That was like that. There was that documentary, Eat the Sun. Did you ever see that one? But they had a guy in there. There was an Indian guy. He claimed he was a breatharian and didn't eat. And then the camera crew followed him secretly one day, and they caught him in an Indian restaurant at an all-you-can-eat buffet, just shoving his face. He's like, "No, I eat once in a while." They're like, "You have 6 dishes from the buffet." I just wanted to read something, and then maybe if you want, we can go on to like resonance and what you're talking about with the constellations and the salts. Like, how do these work with the atmosphere? But in the book that we were both talking about, and for those watching, this is called The Zodiac and the Salts of Salvation by Dr. George Washington Carey and Inez Innuendo Perry. But there's a funny story in here under Capricorn, which is your, Capricorn is your lime sulfate. It's your digestion in your bones and albumin. But it was talking about King George V of England. And he had semi-paralysis of the organs and malnutrition. And so they brought all the old school doctors in, but they couldn't get him better. No matter what they tried to do, they couldn't heal him. So they got this guy, Dr. Dodds, a professor of biochemistry in London, and he found that his blood was low in calcium. So they gave it to him, under the tongue, like you could do with the salts, because one thing is, if the salts that govern your digestion are gone, you can eat as healthy as you want to. You're not going to take in the nutrients anyway from the food, you know. So I thought that was pretty interesting that he healed him with this salt, you know, pretty much from paralysis, which is absolutely fascinating. You know, what happens today if you go into a hospital with organ paralysis? They probably cut it out if they can.
Oh, yeah. You reminded me, Barre, of a memory that I had probably about 25 years ago. And I was actively practicing my own clairvoyance. I learned about fluoride and how it calcifies the pineal, and how we have other functions of knowing, other ways of knowing, other ways of interacting with our world. I met Hiro Ratan Manek. He's HRM. He's one of the sun gazers who doesn't eat or drink water. And he does barefoot walking in the morning on dew-coated grass to absorb the sunlight residue and the overnight dew minerals, and just sun gazes and sometimes drinks sunshine water. And he hasn't eaten food in over 10 years. And his chi, his vitality was just unbelievable. His voice just projected, and this is in a man supposedly in his 70s, right? So so what it reminded me of was I was trying to practice seeing energy, and I would lay on the grass and I would just look at the trees and I would try to get as relaxed as possible. And I could start to see these little bit of earth energy, as I called it, and the trees would eat it. So all of these look like little tiny dots with tails would just swim around like this. And I would see the trees and the plants just taking it in and breathing it in and absorbing it in. And that's the first instance that I realized that the air is not just nothing, it's nutrition. And it was actually more nutritious, to the point even where we had pollens and other things of nature in the air in a beautiful way, where we'd breathe that in, and the pollens themselves would have the minerals and the foods that we needed. So from that aspect, and then from just the microbial milieu also being essential for us, and why we don't want to kill these things, and that sets up the rest of the digestive tract, you know, at birth, or, you know, when you're little and you eat dirt or you start to taste your environment, and that is important for not only your gut health and that which we understand, but the entire body, and the world, tasting the world that we're in, and that we're not just separate from it, that it's part of us. And once I learned that, it was like it clicked for me. And I think breatharianism was easier then than it is now, being whatever they're doing to our atmosphere with the spraying and the HARP technologies and these sorts of things, as well as the levels of pollution are not where they were. And so we have to be cleansing all the time. Usually you would just cleanse maybe in the spring or every so often a few years. But now it's like we're always cleansing. We always have to stay on top of it. So now more needs of inputs for these essentials are required just to do simple functions, which I find quite alarming. And I try not to go into dour states of thought because it's worrisome. Okay. And I know we're trying to make amends and change things for the better for the future. But right now it's not really wonderful, let's just say, with the amount that we have to deal with.
Yeah, and like as you're saying, Amanda, it's expending so much energy, having to constantly be in a state of healing, that I think that's where the cell salts are very important. I just take them daily, like as preventative. I don't wait till I get an ailment. I just take them every day. And that's that. And you're right. And like, you know, we used to, when I was a kid, we were out eating dirt and worms, all kinds of crap, but you know, they're chemtrailing above. I wouldn't even want my kid out eating the dirt these days overhead. You know, you just don't know what's in that. So yeah, we're in a bit of a pickle, humanity, that's for sure. But resonance we were going to talk about. Did you have something to add to that, Barre? Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, to mitigate what the bad guys are doing as we think of it, or maybe the bad guys are really serving a purpose and making us, you know, reach into ourselves a little bit deeper. You know, there are larger patterns in the universe, larger cycles within our realm that supersede what anybody on the ground can do. And for those that are seeking knowledge, truly seeking knowledge, the veils are becoming very thin, which makes us more amenable to receiving these original patterns of intelligence that will then transmute on the instant anything they can throw at us. So curiously, you know, a lot of us find ourselves having little symptoms now and then when there's a lot of spraying overhead and whatever, but at the same time, things curiously are getting better at the same time.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? It's like I can see both. It's like there's two paths before us, but at the same time, despite that negative path that, you know, is the dark path, if you will, and there might be souls that they've really lost themselves, and for whatever reason, they need to go all the way down, and that's their turnaround. But for those of us, we don't need to do that, and we've worked through those aspects of the ego, or those fractioned off aspects due to trauma. We've integrated those traumas, so we don't need to keep recycling them or trying to complete them inside of us. And our trajectory is different because of that. And this is the true protection, which people don't realize. You know, they all say safe and effective and all this, which is the exact opposite, of course. Everything that they say is 100% the opposite. But what we realize is that when we do this work, when we have that level, at least some level of self-discipline, and take self-ownership of what's happening in our lives, that responsibility is on us, then it changes the way we look outward and the way that we approach problems. And it helps us, our inner guide, get better and better at avoiding pitfalls that we don't need that lesson again, or, you know, we don't need to suffer because we love ourselves. We don't hate, we don't have malice to the self, and we don't want to continue sinning. We don't want to continue being in deficiency because clearly we have a world to rebuild. So we better get it together because we're the builders, and we need that inspiration, you know, that inward breath, that literal inspiration to fuel what we need to do forward. So I'm pretty excited about it, actually.
Yeah, completely. I mean, that's funny, like you said, because yeah, it's like some of us are, I just call it a bullshit detector. But yeah, when you see safe and effective and you say, that doesn't resonate with me, and you're like, what do you mean? Well, resonance is, you know, you play a guitar string in one room, in the other room there's a guitar tuned to the same frequency. Even though there's a door and a wall, it'll make the other string vibrate, but only that big string, not the other 5 strings. And that's kind of what I think is happening, is certain of us are starting to retune ourselves. And that's why we do smell bullshit. And you say, how come you can't, you know, you meet people and say, how can you not see what's going on? And they can't, because they're resonating with the lies and the nonsense. They're vibrating at a lower frequency, you know, and the point is to raise yourself to a higher frequency so that when you see bullshit at low frequency bullshit, it doesn't resonate with you. You're like, nah, I can't even buy that. It just feels wrong. I don't feel anything toward it. You know, it doesn't move me, you know.
I mean, that's really the thing with what happened in 2020, is that it has brought so many of us together. And again, obviously that's what this, you know, this summit's about, to show people that, you know, there's plenty of information of how, you know, we can understand our health and how to go forward. And but it's really interesting when you look at it that a lot of this information is not new. We're rediscovering some of this information that's been available for a very long time, except that it was covered and we've been lied to about how our bodies work. So that's why the mental side of things is to get over these false ideas of, and you know, they really have done a very good job of making people believe things, and that's why, you know, it's important to put all these pieces of the puzzle together. And obviously it is really exciting to go forward. So yes, and again, you know, with resonating, if you'd like to go further on that, please, Bear, you know, talking about resonance.
Yeah, and you know, this goes back full circle to the what we've mentioned, that we are an electrical driven biology. We live in an electrical realm. And if you want to relate that to the inorganic elements, as we've been speaking on, each one of those can be understood in terms of electricity. We'll take one example. you'll take the calcium compounds, where we have three main ones. Fluoride, it helps lay down elastic tissue. You have the calcium phosphorus, which is more, akin to more the hard tissues and connective tissues, and a calcium sulfuricum, which is does a lot of things. All these we're just simplifying, but helps the body get rid of what it doesn't need, in the connective tissue matrix. But all the calcium compounds have one thing in common, in that and again, I'll go back to ionization analysis, where we're looking at the line of resistance that anybody can learn how to measure in the body or in the soil. Calcium is the most useful for pushing the resistance, or the pH, or the speed, the velocity of electricity back to a balance point. So if you're a little bit too far, either on one side, acidic or alkaline, that's very misunderstood. And especially, I think, in alternative circles, where we're always talking about, you need to be alkaline. Well, not necessarily. You have to be balanced. So calcium is a great way in order to achieve that balance. And so if you take the right type of calcium at the right time, and in conjunction with knowing how to do the ionization analysis, you can achieve that balance. And that calcium that helps to support that is also, when the electrical line is back, in a more favorable zone, it's going to have a great effect on the liver, which is going to help digestion. Those calcium also, help the parietal cells of the stomach make just enough, not too much, of hydrochloric acid, so we have sufficient first stage digestion. So when you start connecting all these pieces, it actually goes back to our electrical realm, and the fact that every single organ of our body, every cell of our body, every organism, even the inorganic elements themselves, are toroidal fields. And with that, we would have to go into a little bit of a discussion of waveform mechanics and how those toroidals are created in the first place, which we can do, or we can just use that to segue into something else.
I would love if you could talk more about that, actually. That's how I understand this. Even with astrology, with the cardinal and the fixed, and then the mutable, which means transmutable, which means when Dawn asked earlier, why are there 12 of these instead of 13? Well, wave mechanics is my understanding, they come in 12. Is that correct? Not 13. And there's like, the Egyptians called it atum. There's like the explosion or the pulse and the reverb, atum and eve, reverb. And so you've got this force, and then that's the cardinal sign. Then it's fixed. It's like stabilized. And then that wave goes into a mutable form, which means it's ready to be changed. It's receptive and ready to boom for the next cardinal point of the wave, which mutates it from the transmutable. Then it's stable, then it's ready to be changed, correct? And it's really what we're talking about is that. But I'd love, this is what I came to learn from you. So I'd love if you could expound, please.
Well, if we simplify, and I'll try to make this real quick, because I want to hear what the rest of you have to say about this. We live in a thought-based universe, because if we're talking about electricity, there's only one progenitor of electricity, and that is thought. Every thought is an electrical event. And every electrical event creates a polarization. And a polarization, you can think of it as plucking on a guitar string. It's going to reverberate until it comes to a place of rest, and then, the sound stops. And that's pretty much the way the universe works. That has great implications, because if we come to the realization that we are capable of thought, then we are capable of creation. Now, if you look at that etheric mechanism again, and see how that those electrical vectors start on the mental plane and then go through the different planes of our consciousness, collecting emotions for velocity along the way, and into the etheric body, and finally into the physical body. That is what we call the compression half of the toroidal cycle. So think of it in modern computer terms, where we have informational fields, data that is compressed into forms that we can, all look at each other on the screen right now. It's no different when we have a thought. And that compression is a centrifugal force that creates a cone into a pinpoint. And when it reaches that point of final compression, that's what our senses, which are part of that same matrix, by the way, no more real than, the other thought forms that create what we think we're saying. That compression creates what we think of as physical materialization. Simultaneously, you have a centripetal force that is going up in the opposite direction, unwinding those data fields so they can return to source and be renewed for the next frame of the movie that we think we're experiencing here. So if you look at how it's coming down this way and then going back up this way, that's the perfect toroidal going in those simultaneous two directions. And in my practice, I use different instruments, a Lecker antenna that was created by an Austrian physicist, biogeometry, other forms of radiesthesia, where you can get very adept at measuring these toroidal fields and find where there's distortions in the north-south pole and the east, and then actually relate that to different levels of our biology, our psyche, our emotional body, and so forth. So again, I always want to bring it back to this has very practical use. And with that, in like an initial consultation with, a client, it's very useful to know what that toroidal is doing, how that relates, and then everything from that point on in your treatment is within that context.
And how can you talk a little bit about, so when you have the cell salts inside you, and then you have the different frequencies coming from what we'll call the cosmos, how exactly are they interacting, and what are they doing? How can you just expound a little bit on that resonance?
Well, our thoughts have to play on the larger canvas of creation, and we can create distortions, but we can also receive the original purity. So those cell salts, again, if you liken them to capacitors that receive the resonance from the larger constellations over our head. And the constellations are also step downs of other energies, 7 in particular. That's another whole story. But, then the cell salts that coincide with 12 constellations, and I know there's more cell salts than just 12, but we'll just talk about the primary ones. Then they can receive that resonance that then allows the centripetal compression cycle, the toroidal field, to be received. And then, of course, that old saying in Chinese medicine, your feet need to be rooted in the ground and your head in the heavens. When you're entertaining in your consciousness how this whole thing works in the first place, that facilitates the radiation cycle of giving it back up to the source in the first place. So you have this perfect balanced interplay between the two.
And if they're not balanced, then what happens? Like now you have a visual of what, I mean, if anyone can just go get a GIF of a toroidal field in motion and get the idea in their head if they're not familiar, right? But then what if one or two little parts is out and there's shearing and friction? So how would the material get the signal to produce the right action, to move forward correctly? Might struggle with that in health. So because we've measured toroidal fields over our bodies, for example, and there's theories that our realm is one big toroidal field, and as above, so below, and as below, so above, there's the micro to the macro in all these relationships. And when you really go into this material, there's a type of brain that has to happen just to conceive of it, because it's so elegant and beyond brilliant, and the way that everything seems to flow, if we just stay out of nature's way, everything works perfectly, despite the cataclysms and whatever stories that happen. I think all those happen because of choices, because we do have free will, so we're allowed to make mistakes, right? And these things were all caused by us disturbing the natural form of all of these fields. And how we get back to that might be song. Maybe you just gotta make some more music, Steve.
Yeah, I get paid for it already. I'm trying to make less.
Oh.
I've got, if you want to, just real quick, I actually have a graphic of a toroidal field here. We can just play a little small bit, maybe, if you want to.
Yeah, good idea.
Let me share it. So, because I think it's very good for people to see what you're talking about. Centripetal means the force out from the inside of the field, and centrifugal means sorry, out. Pedal is the force coming in. There you go. Can you see that? I didn't make the words above it, but so you can see the energy popping out the top and then returning back in. Now, if you could see further along the outside, that energy would be going around the sides and returning.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much what we're talking about there, if you want to get that in your head. And it's my understanding that, funny enough, Earth is an anagram for ether. The word Earth, we live in the ether on an anagram. It's my understanding that everything is a toroidal field. Your heart has one, your whole body has one, the Earth is one. If you want to call them atoms inside you, you know, they tell us atoms are, they'd say they're nothing. They say, well, it's a proton and 6 electrons and 5 in a neutron, you know. Well, really what they're talking about is that they're actually talking about a toroidal field with positive charge, negative charge, and then a neutral dielectric charge, which just means, I have another graphic here. The dielectricity just means it doesn't run, the electricity doesn't run through the plane of that thing. Here's one here. And forget all the religious stuff, but that's your yin and yang the way I understand it. You got your black still light dielectric, your white still invisible light magnetic. And from that, which we could call thought or God or the monad, and then the two of these together are the dyad or the duad, come all of what we call physicality. Is that how you understand this, Barre, in a very simplified way?
No, that's perfect. And graphics always help. I think it's also important to understand the most powerful toroidal field in our biology is our heart. And as we are conceived, the first step in that embryological unfoldment of our physical form begins with, we used to call the seed atom, which then differentiates into the heart. And the heart is the most capable organ, thinking organ in our self that, you know, can receive those perceptive bandwidths that explain all this in the first place. And, you know, as we've done a great disservice in modern science is that we've disassociated all the parts. And that includes within ourself where we create a chasm between our mental and emotional plane, or the heart and the mind, however you want to think of it. So our job, so I'm told, is to reunify the heart and the mind so the heart can really tell the mind what the mind is searching for, and what the heart is known, you know, from the get-go. And you know, this isn't a new age concept about, you know, gooey come from your heart stuff. This is real physics and the ability to receive information direct from the source. And I like, you know, I think martial arts is a great science and practical, you know, application of science, in that you learn how to focus on different internal centers in your body. And I know if I'm in a snit about something or having a bad day, all I have to do is focus on the heart. And it has, you know, not only do you feel an immediate expansion from that center, but it transmutes any lower emotion, you know, that we might have been entertaining, and instantly everything's right in your world. So, you know, it's just imagine a little bit of knowledge with, you know, a little bit of practical practice of putting your attention on the places that will achieve whatever result you desire.
Absolutely. I think it's kind of funny when you think about Well, I can show it here. When you think about the body as a toroidal field, you know, we have all these strange sayings like, yeah, you know, think with your heart or go with your gut feeling, you know, it's your heart and your gut. But I mean, really, if you put a dielectric plane right through the middle of a human being's entire toroidal field, it's the heart and gut are right there at the center or source. You know what I mean? It's like, I think it's kind of funny. They're the closest organs right to the dead center of the whole body's main toroidal field. And then your heart, I was told that it was measured at a 6 foot in diameter. I was told the toroidal field for the human heart is 6 foot in diameter. And we were told the social distance, how far apart? Probably just a coincidence though, right?
That's from the heart. If people want to research that further, they can look up the Heart Math Institute that measured this field of the heart specifically. And if they're interested in the science aspect of it.
Is it correct? 6 foot? Is that, would you remember?
6 foot, yeah.
Yeah. Just want to make sure, fact check what I'm saying.
Yeah. You've been fact checked.
Thank you. Yes, I don't know where you guys want to take this here. I don't want to get way too esoteric or anything. We could do the ring if you want to go around the astrological ring and the waveforms and just show people like which salts do which body part. You know, we could do that. Or what do you guys want to do? Really, we're kind of winging it from here.
Yeah, I mean, it's been what, how long now? Over an hour?
I think about an hour and hour and a half, hour and 35 minutes, maybe.
So I know that Alec asked us not to go too long with these. Like there was one that was like 3 hours or something. So it's like there's so much material he doesn't want them at the 2 hour mark, but maybe Dawn, did you have more questions that you think we didn't answer throughout this, or did you have like a wrap up kind of question or anything?
No, you've pretty much covered the kind of areas I was hoping. I mean, and gone deeper, of course. It's really to help people understand that that this is a completely new way of looking at how the body works. But it's how the body really works. It's really understanding that it's more than just the sort of physical and this sort of actual minerals. That's the energetic, how we're connected to the whole cosmos, and why the sort of zodiac, why there's an influence of the zodiac signs, and why it's useful to actually look at the zodiac sign when you're born, and the mineral salts that are related to that, because we are depleted by what's going on in the world. So if we're wanting to look at which is this section, a new health story, if we're concerned with optimizing our health, then we need to be aware of these aspects, and it's adding to our knowledge of what to do, but also showing that it's not something new. This information has been around for a while, but it's been seriously occulted from us.
It is, yeah. It's a very old science. Maybe we should also I can quickly give a little bibliography if people are interested in finding more of this. One of the books we would definitely recommend is the one we've been showing, The Zodiac and Salts of Salvation. That's by Dr. George Washington Carey. He also made another one called God Man, the Word Made Flesh. Now, if this is too, oh, there we go. Dawn's got it.
I've been doing my homework.
I'll lift it up again, Dawn, while you're on screen, big. There. Then if this is all too out there, spacey Casey for you, and you just want to say, hey, this is the medical condition I have, what damn salts do I take? You can, there's one called the Biochemic System of Medicine. There it is. She's got, or you could just come to Dawn's house and have tea, and she could.
I think you could come to any of our houses and we would probably we'd probably flood them with a lot.
Oh yes, I'm not pretending I've got the books. I'm sure Barre has a vast library of this sort of these sorts of books and lots of other information. It's just that we've been talking about the sort of George Carey book, and so it's just showing some of the starting points. And again, that's where I've started to really, as I say, do some homework. I've been looking into it because, again, it is fascinating. So if you want to go into a bit more detail of which zodiac, Steve, if you wanted to go
And
through.
also, just quickly, I wanted to mention about the oil, because there's so we're talking about tissue cells, but then another really important, people are like, what should I be taking or doing or thinking about, is the amount of oils. And there's, in that book, is discussed about the Christos, which is this, every month there's a secretion that comes through the brain and down into through the spine and into the body, and there's like there's a reciprocation through the spine, and that this christening is essential for health, well-being, spiritual enlightenment, all of these aspects, and that we keep missing the boat on our Christos, on our nourishing oil, and that we need oil in our bodies, and we tend to be very deficient as we age. We kind of crenate or dehydrate, but it's because we're not lubricated properly as well, that these things, that the skin dries out and wrinkles and we age. So I don't know if someone's more versed in the aspect of Carrie and the oil or the Christos or other aspects of oil, but I find that really interesting to tie in with the salts, because obviously there's more things we do need for the system to run well and to live long, and the oils are a really interesting esoteric biochemistry aspect as well.
Do you want to go on that, Barre? I can go a little bit. Go ahead, Barre. I'd like to hear what you have to say on
Well,
it.
I was a quick comment. Calcium sulfuricum under the sign of Virgo, which has a lot to do with, the bowels and the skin and that sort of thing, is responsible largely for the manufacture and distribution of oils. And when that is deficient, one of the things that happens, that oil starts clogging the pores, and the pores are how we breathe out toxins and bring in good things as well. And so when, that deficiency happens and that outgassing is not happening through our largest elimination organ, which is the skin, then all those elements the body's trying to eliminate have to go elsewhere and then create symptoms that are associated with whatever organ is being bogged down by the stuff in the first place. Then, of course, with medicine, we give it a nice fancy Latin name and consider that a disease entity.
Yeah, absolutely. And Virgo is the oils too. You can see older people when they get very wrinkly and stuff, you can tell that they're deficient actually in the Virgo salt. But what you're talking about, Amanda, yeah, for starters, men, you really should not be ejaculating, having masturbation set. You can masturbate if you want, but do not finish the deal. Same when you have sex, because you can go as long as you want, but don't seal the deal at the end. And you know this because you're exhausted right after a male ejaculates. The woman wants to talk, and he's like, he's already knocked out in bed. This is your life force going out. And if you can save it, there will come a time when it can magnetically be returned. The body has different kinds of oil, just like out in the world. There's, Saudi Arabia's got the good stuff and Canada's got some dirty, same with our body. And the pure stuff, the Bible says you need to pay back 1/10. You need to return 1/10. They're not talking about paying taxes to the government. They're talking about taking 1/10 of your oil and bringing it back up through your brain, and it will open up. They say, oh, we only use 10% of our brain. The rest are dormant gray brain cells. Well, that's not true. If you can keep returning this oil, you can activate those dormant brain cells, and you can use a lot more than 10%. And now we start to wonder, well, why? How come the ancients could build all this stuff we can't figure out and all this beautiful architecture? I don't know. I would suggest they knew this, and they had a lot more going on up in their brain than we have right now.
Yeah. Well,
so without getting into the
retention, go ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead, Barre. Go.
Well, I was just going to say, beyond retention, now you can consciously bring that up the back of the spine and circulate it through, what we call the microcosmic orbit. And then after several circulations, then you can collect it at the Dantian and, gather that energy. And that's useful for many things. It's just like an energy source waiting to be used for mental activities, physical activities. And then, most important, especially for men, I agree, you aren't squandering that bank account that we're given at birth.
Yeah, and there's only so much of it, it's not an endless supply. And so what you're talking about, this is what, Kundalini, but also the Qi Gung, right? When you see the Qi healers, they're pulling this energy down there and then pushing it out. Is that what you're talking about? After you get it cycling, you're talking about Qi pooling or prana or going.
Yeah, I like the orbit technique. I mean, Kundalini can be, depending your level of advancement, can be a little bit sketchy for some people if you bring too much energy too quick. But if you're circulating it and bringing it back into the storage area there, you're not going to have any psychotic episodes or any other kinds of issues. And, in the practice of martial arts or medicine, with hands-on pranic healing, whatever, we're also taught that you kind of meter that energy out for those endeavors. You never give more than 10%, and you actually kind of get a hang of how much is there and how much to use, because, the first level of mastery is you learn how to use energy, but you don't ever waste it at the same time, even if you're trying to help somebody else.
Yeah, that's interesting because I experienced as a practitioner burnout from making those mistakes, giving too much away, and then finding myself sort of emptied out and depleted and not able to really cope with the things I was, coping with before, coupled with being a single mom. And it taught me a lot. My path is really about dipping down into it, tasting it, bring it back up, and then sharing the knowledge and being the teacher archetype, which is fine, but the teacher has to be wise, and it takes the life to learn the wisdom. So I realized that the sage is developing through these experiences to then realize that you will come to a whisper to teach now, like rather than so much information, we're going to get to essence, where you're sitting before the student and they speak, and then you say one word and it clicks, and that opens their own doors, and then they are learning from their own systems once again through the oversoul, as we alluded to earlier, rather than this very labor intensive slow method of having to teach our children all this stuff. Like, I kept thinking about, there's more and more history we're making, and there's more and more recorded history than ever before. How on earth is one person, one baby, going to now figure out where the history class is going? Because, like, whoa, man, there's a lot more every day. So how do we even understand or hold this in ourselves? And it's that chi, that prana, that energy that is part of it. And by the way, with the ejaculation in Chinese medicine, that comes from the kidneys. So you have at your essence, which is birth essence, which also can be pulled from food essence. So if you depleted that essence originally, the original essence, you're only going on food at that point. And so you better get right with that, because if you got that wrong, then you're out. So it's just the history aspect of it, though, really was boggling my mind. I feel we have to come into this enlightened state just to move forward at all, just so we can hold more inside of us without breaking our psyche. And what we see that people get overwhelmed and they crack, right? And I would say a lot of the mental issues and things that we judge even like as bad, and things that are going on right now that are very crazy or seem crazy, well, they are, is because of these deficiencies in the brain itself. The organ itself is in these salt deficiencies and can't work out all of this information.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that ties in with what Barre was saying. The thing is, though, you're right. It's not just like each and every one of us. It's like humanity is waiting for this to happen for a golden age. We all need to get our shit together. And as Barre was saying, there's larger things going on, Yeah, Bill Gates and they're out there sticking people in the arm with deadly stuff right now. But a lot of the people who are taking that aren't going to be the kind of people who are going to get right with the rest of this stuff anyway. So for all we know, there's a larger purpose, and some people are just meant to leave the realm right now so that those sticking around can get with it, carry on and sort it out. We don't know. But yeah, it's really interesting. But yeah, you're right. That's the problem with this stuff. Once your brain damaged and your nervous system is damaged, you're not going to be sitting around learning this stuff. You're going to be too agitated. You're going to be behaving poorly. You're not going to be able to have conversations like this with people because you'll be fighting constantly. We see that constantly right now. Debate is gone. There's just arguments flat out. You know, this is brain damaged people trying to have a discussion. They just want to win. They don't give a shit if they come to a mutual understanding, you know, or agree to disagree. So yeah, totally. I don't know, Dawn, we can blow through the wheel real quick if you want. I don't think we should dilly-dally on it, but you want to go around it real quick? I can show it.
Yes, and I think that'll probably bring this
Cool.
to a close, unless anyone's got any particular points. I mean, obviously this could go on for quite a while.
Yeah, I don't think we
and
should.
much
I don't
information.
think we should linger too long. But and if
Okay.
you guys have anything to say, just leave your mics open and shout it out as we go. Can you see that? Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So on the left here, you see Aries, and that's your head. So in the middle, you'll see the human body wrapped around in a circle like this. Now, without going too crazy into it, when you're born or when you're created in the womb, the first thing that happens is the cerebrum and the spinal cord form. And then all around this wheel, the body starts building from your mother, giving you these minerals and what we've been talking about. So, and as Barre was saying, these are the main minerals that make up these things, but they do interact with other minerals. It's not only this and that. So going around the wheel, your cerebrum, you can see is your potassium phosphate, Caliphos. Cerebrum, spinal cord, sensory nerves, face to lower jaw. Next, you got your Taurus people. That's your cerebellum, your neck, your gallbladder, and your throat. And that's natrium, sulfur, sulfate of sodium. Next, you have your Gemini people. That's your chloride of potassium. That's what we talked about, the hands, pleural glands, shoulders, and lungs, fibers and tissues, very important. Next, you got Cancer, the crab. He walks back and forth, which is why it goes between two signs. It's the elastic tissue, the breast, stomach, spleen. That's fluoride of lime or calcium fluoride. That's also good for people who have ulcers and stuff. Fluoride of lime is like plaster of Paris. It can strengthen up the ulcer in the stomach. Leo, then you've got your heart, motor nerves, back, sides near the heart. That's your magnesium phosphate. Now's your Virgo, your solar plexus, and your oils. This is really important. The Odes of Horus says like poison loads the oil. People who are born Virgo, they're very susceptible to food poisoning. They get food poisoning real bad. I'm one, and I almost got killed on a chicken nachos one time for 2 weeks. So that's your sulfate of potassium. Then you got your Libra, the scales are balanced, which is obviously your kidneys, bladder, your acid neutralizers. So that's good, like Barre was talking about. You know, you don't want to be too highly acidic or too neutralizing, but this is your sodium phosphate, natrium phos. Then you got your Scorpio, which is your genitals, which is why they chose the scorpion. Now, in ancient times, the old glyph for Scorpio was actually the eagle or the phoenix. It wasn't always a scorpion. So, you know, like we don't want to go off-roading too much with the Bible and stuff, but like if you read Revelation 4:7 in the Bible, it says the first living creature was like a lion, the second was like an ox, the third had the face of a man, and the fourth was a flying eagle. And what Revelations is talking about is the fixed signs. You got Leo here, the lion. Dead across from him, you got Aquarius, the only man in the Zodiac. He has his face like a man. There's a woman, but he's the only human man besides Sagittarius, half horse. Right. And then the other one was an ox. That's Taurus. You'll see if you just draw a perfect cross, you get Leo to there, and then you got Taurus down over to the other one here, Scorpio, the eagle. So that passage of Revelations is not talking about an actual beast coming out of the sea. It's talking about how do you find the fixed sign of the Zodiac. Anyway, moving on. So Scorpio is your procreative organs and your vascular coatings and casts. Lime sulfate, calcium sulf. Then you have Sagittarius, the half man, half horse, shooting at the sun with his bow and arrow. And that's your hips, thighs, surgeon, spade, and insulators, right? So that's why he's got the hips of a horse. These are your hips. That's your Sagittarius, why he's half man, half horse. Then you got your Capricorn, which is digestion, bones, knees, sacrum, albumin. That's lime phosphate or calcium phosphate. And Aquarius is the water bearer, the pitcher, or it's the dude pouring out the water. And that's your ankles, obviously the saline solution of the blood. That's why he's the water bearer. He's the saline of the blood. And the white corpuscles, which is when they're talking about wasting your Christos oil, that you're talking about ejaculating corpuscles, basically. You don't want to do that. That's sodium chloride, natrium, myrrh. And then the last one is Pisces, the feet, the two fish. You know, Jesus fans will like that when you can feed everyone with two fish. That's the feet, arterial blood, and the red corpuscles. And that's your ferrum or your iron, like Barre was saying. This is what the iron attracts the oxygen. Is that correct? That's the iron is oxygenating the system, correct?
And copper plays an important role as well.
Yes, like with electroculture. And then
With the blood, I mean.
Yeah, which will bring us back to Aries. Dun, dun, dun. So that's it. The ancients drew our body and all their wisdom around the zodiac stars in the night, and they made a little story to go along with both our body and the sun every year and the toroidal field mechanics of waves. And some geniuses, I don't know who did this, they put this all together. And the people who made a clock today did the same thing. You can see on the left, that's 6 a.m. Aries. That's Aries, 6 a.m., 7, 8, then 8 to 10, you got Taurus, then till noon. Every day, these energies are cycling through for 2 hours at a pop. And every year, there's an overarching energy cycle that's cycling for 12 months or 12, a month out of the year. So these energies start happening throughout the day. They also happen with the sun. They happen in our body. They happen in our mind. And it's a really deep subject. You could go on and on. But again, get the books that we talked about, and you can really dive deep into this if you want. Do you guys want to add anything else to this wheel, or?
I think you did a good job there.
Yeah, you were very thorough.
Thank you. I read well. So that's all I have to say. But I just wanted to say it was a pleasure. I've done this is my fourth one of these, actually the fifth, because we had to redo one. So this was the best for last. This was the one I was really looking most forward to. The others were great, but it's an honor and a privilege to sit and have this discussion. I learned a lot.
Yeah, same here. It's wonderful because this is really forward thinking now. This is moving into solutions and remembering what we need to and where we're going to be in the future. And we don't have to ever get caught up in a situation like we just went through ever again, because with this knowledge, you'll never fall for another hoax like that, right? Because you understand from this whole summit that we don't have these, this is not how disease works with some sort of living particle apparently in the air that comes in randomly and hurts you. Like that's just that boogeyman story isn't real. And they flipped what's real and unreal on its head. And we have to reorient ourselves now in this place. And that's why anything they say, I just flip it 180 immediately. So it's immediate. If they say yes, it's immediately a no, and this sort of thing. And that's where I start from. And if people learn to do that, then the fear drops away. There's no place for it. It just keeps you low in that space where you're going to resonate with more fear. And you really don't want it. If you ask anyone honestly what they want peace, they want happiness, they want joy in their lives. They don't want the perpetual fear. And this is empowerment, what we're presenting here for people to just run with. And then when another media scandal comes out trying to convince you to be afraid of something, you're going to go, yeah. I see what's going on here. Yeah, no, we're good. Yeah, we'll just switch that television off and toss it away and move on with connecting with nature, listening to nature's wisdom, connecting to source, and bringing through our life in a meaningful way, because everyone wants that meaning. And what I see now with the world is that we've lost that. We've lost what's the meaning and the point of anything anymore, and we need to regain it. So I hope this has left people with a little bit of inspiration and a new way of looking at their world that will improve themselves and their families and their communities. Yeah.
I'm envisioning a world where every human interaction will be just as delightful as this gathering here today. And that is what I think we can call heaven on earth.
Yeah. Just one last thing. I want to show people what cell salts are because it might help if they're like, what the hell are you talking about? Here's a bottle I get from England. So you take them out, you know, you get a couple tablets or whatever you got. I don't know if you can see that. Not yet. Not yet. There.
Higher, there you
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
See that? You put them under your tongue and let them dissolve.
Oh, so you don't crush them and like make them into nice lines and then, no, you don't do
That's
that.
that's the other that's the
Okay,
difference
got it.
also. I suppose you could snort them. They probably go right up to the brain just as quick, but this way they did this way they dissolve right into your bloodstream and they're usable immediately. They don't have to go through digestion, which is like what happened with that King George V, I think it was, we talked about. He came to the point where he could no longer get the nutrients through his stomach. So that's the good thing. We live in the age of biochemistry. Like we can actually have people prepare this stuff for us. So we're very lucky. We're in a very lucky time. We just have to.
I'll leave you. I'll leave you with this. This is a laser that creates a geometric waveform of the 12 cell salts, which you can focus in a glass of water and drink the waveforms directly of the 12 cell salts. So there's many ways of getting these things.
Wait, without putting the salts in there, you mean you shine it in the water?
Yep.
Yeah,
And it
well, the
makes
water
them-
will have the memory, right? It's a
Right.
memory. Yeah. Mhm.
Oh yeah. Well, you putting the links where to get that? I want one. This like cell salt poker, Amanda. What are you gonna bring, Dawn? You got? I see your laser, and I raise you. What do you got?
I
No,
got a
I-
terahertz one back here. I'm gonna do the terahertz one and
Right,
Instruct-
I
Okay.
should have started this because I can't raise any of you, but I mean, this has been an absolutely wonderful conversation. It shows there is loads more to learn, but for people not to be actually afraid. I mean, you put it so beautifully, Amanda, with not being afraid. I mean, that's just so key, and understanding how our bodies really work. And it's again, you know, so that we can make sure that they not just have the nutrients, but they absorb them properly, the right energy, the right thoughts, the right connection to anything, and well, to everything, and you know, and whatever it is to help you feel better. So, you know, I know it sounds all very new agey, but you know, yeah, go hug a tree because there's plenty of energy out there. So yes, I mean, grounding, there's all sorts of ways of connecting with nature to feel better. And again, this is part of it. It's how we feel, and as you said fairly right at the beginning, it starts from the inside as well, which is why the teaching can't always be out there. You have to take time out and kind of assimilate the learning to take you to the next phase. And then and you know, the more of this kind of work you do, the more wonderful people you meet, as we've had in this conversation. So unless there's any final words, I'd just like to say thank you, Bear, thank you, Steve, thank you, Amanda. This has been absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure people will find it just amazing, and really hope it'll inspire everyone to start diving into this information in more detail. So thank you again very much, all of you.
Thank you, Dawn. Great to have you hosting. I'm glad it was you.
Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much. This is
Absolutely.
wonderful. And I know we could go into a lot of deep territory here, but we're just gonna help people just begin and not feel overwhelmed with the knowledge, and know that you can go as deep as you want to with this. And yeah, this was wonderful, and I hope people really feel better after this. Like they take a deep breath and release and know there's answers for them. And I bet there's going to be a lot of sales of tissue salts after this.
And don't write me with your medical problems. I made a movie called Esoteric Biochemistry Debunks Religion, Freemasonry, and Chickenpox. And I literally get 50 emails a day from people like, my mother's got this, my dog's got that, I've got this. And I'm not a doctor, people. So please don't write me. I can't give you medical advice. I have to send them screenshots all the time. Like, well, you could take a look at that and see what you think, but yeah. And I'll put a link in the description. There's a Facebook page that's all cell salts, and people write in, and there's people on there running it. And you say what your illness is. And then everyone has a forum and discussion. There's a few experts, and then yeah, so there's a lot of people like kind of saying, well, this, that, and the other. So it's maybe a nice little reference point if you're brand new, because like Amanda said, I mean, I've been studying this stuff since 2006, and I still don't even know half of it. Like, Barre has just taught me a crap load. I didn't know about this already, and Amanda as well. So yeah, so we'll leave a link in the under there is something like that, right? Like a reference thing or something as they watch the conference. Yeah. So I'll put the Facebook link in there if people want to go in there and find out what to do.
Awesome. Thank you, Don.
Wow. Brilliant. I mean, that was